Hi, welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today's video is part of a series I do where I compare books with their movie adaptations. And through these videos, I discuss why the majority of the time, when it comes to the book versus movie, the book wins. Now, having said that, I enjoy watching movies just as much as I enjoy reading books. Like, I love both. So I do give unbiased reviews of both book and movie, I think, for the most part. I also wanted to let you know that this is available as a podcast. And so these tend to be about 30 minutes long, but especially for ones that go over that, if it just works better for you to listen to it as a podcast, they are available. So just search Why the Book Wins in whatever podcasting platform you use. I will also link to them down below for Spotify and Google Podcast. For Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because those are the ones most people use. So yeah, if you would rather do that, those are available too. And before we get into this video, I do want to say that there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie. So if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie and do not want it spoiled, then go do that first and then come back and watch this video. Without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Hi, welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today I'm here to talk about Anne of Green Gables, a book by L.M. Montgomery. It was published as L.M. Montgomery, but her full name is Lucy Maud Montgomery. Published in 1908, and then I'm going to be talking about the made-for-TV adaptation, which was released in 1985. And I am specifically wearing a shirt with puffy sleeves just for this video because, as you will know if you've read the book or seen the movie, puff sleeves are very stylish at this time, and Anne wants a puffed sleeve dress so bad, and then Matthew finally buys her one. So that is why I am specifically wearing a puffed sleeve shirt, which puffed sleeves are back in style now. So I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of puffed sleeve shirts and dresses, which I like. And that's actually a change from book to movie, is where Matthew goes to buy the puffed sleeve dress, and in the book he's too shy to ask the woman behind the counter for the dress, and he ends up going to Mrs. Lind and asking her to do the dress. Whereas in the movie he beats around the bush, but eventually he tells the woman, like, I need a dress for Anne. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The synopsis for this, we have Anne, who is an orphan. She is 11 in the book, and she is an orphan who is adopted by two siblings, Matthew and Marilla, who are getting older, and they wanted a boy, but there was a mix-up and they ended up getting a girl instead. However, Anne wins their hearts over, and it is about her growing up in Avonlea, at Green Gables with Matthew and Marilla, and how she impacts the lives around her and just the happenings of Avonlea. And this is my second time reading this book, and I loved it just as much, maybe even more the second time around. This is just such a sweet, wholesome, fun book. I loved all of the characters. I loved reading about each and every one of them and learning the nuance behind them. Even though this is like a fun book and a good one for kids, it was still interesting to me as an adult. And there were still like lessons learned and things talked about that I could apply to myself in my life, and attributes where I was like, wow, like I want to be more like that. And so there's a lot I highlighted to really be like, wow, like I want to remember that. This is also just such a comfort read, and I just love reading about Avonlea. So this book isn't like a page turner and there's not like a gripping plot, but it's fine because I just love reading about life in Avonlea and Green Gables and Anne's daily life. I just love being there in it. So even if the events aren't moving the plot forward, I don't care because I just love being there and reading about life in Avonlea. The audiobook is narrated by Rachel McAdams, and she was incredible. She does not narrate the next two. So I've read the first three Anne of Green Gables books. There's like 8 total. I've read the first 3. Rachel McAdams narrates this first one, and she is amazing. She's an actress, by the way. You probably will recognize her. I'll post a picture. Anyway, she does not narrate the next 2, which was a shame because I did not like the next 2 narrators as much. Nonetheless, I enjoyed all 3 of these books. The first 3, like I said, there's 8 total. And I've read the first 3 and I loved each of them. And so with the movie, there have been a lot of adaptations of this from like way back in the day up until more recently even. However, everyone who's a fan of Anne of Green Gables thinks of the 1985 adaptation with Megan Follows as being the adaptation. Megan Follows is Anne. She just totally captures the spirit of Anne. And then other adaptations, I thought of like getting out of my comfort zone and watching a newer adaptation. And there was one, I think from a few years back, but it just covered like just the early stages of her adoption. I didn't read good things about it, and I was like, I don't feel like doing that. But there's a Netflix show called Anne with an E, and that one does have really good reviews. However, I just didn't feel like spending the time watching a whole TV show. However, yeah, I've heard good things about it. I did read that they made it darker in some ways, which kind of bugs me. Like, I mean, I enjoy the dark and gritty stuff sometimes too, but what's wrong with having stuff that's just good and fun and wholesome and sweet? And yeah, Anne, in the book, we learned that she had some hard things happen to her when she was an orphan. So it's not like the book is all like sugary sweet and nothing bad, but it's definitely not a dark book. And so why do they have to make the movie or the TV show dark, you know? So that's just kind of annoying. Anyway, if you've seen Anne without an E, I would love to know what you think. So comment on the YouTube video down below. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, it would mean so much to me if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video. And yeah, anyway, back to the movie. So this movie is over 3 hours long, so plenty of time to include everything from the book. Plus they add some scenes. And it was also filmed on Prince Edward Island. So that's pretty cool because that is, of course, where Avonlea is. And I don't know if Avonlea is a real place, but it's on Prince Edward Island, which is like off the coast of Canada. And yeah, the acting, we have Megan Follows, who, like I said, is perfect as Anne. Not only does she look the part, but she just captures Anne so well, especially as Anne progresses through the course of the book. She starts out young and then as she matures and grows, but she doesn't totally lose that adventurous, idyllic, imaginative youth. You know, she still has some of that as she continues to grow older while also maturing. Colleen Dewhurst plays Marilla, and she is perfect in this role of a woman who loves Anne deeply, but she has a hard time expressing herself. And there's a part in the book, I should have highlighted it, where she talks about how she's envious of Anne, who is so wordy and has such a way with words, whereas Marilla, she has a hard time getting her emotions out in words. Skylar Grant plays Diane, and she is the youngest cast member. She was only 15, which kind of surprised me. She looks older, but she was perfect as Diane. Everybody in this is perfectly cast. Of course, I did see this before reading the book, so as I read the book, I was imagining these people in my mind. Nonetheless, Skylar Grant was wonderful as Diane, who is much more elegant than Anne is, and is more, elegant, refined, and yet also just fun and silly and girlish, you know. Jonathan Crombie, again, is perfectly cast as Gil, who is, he's cocky, but he's likable, and he's good looking, and he's charming, and yet he drives Anne crazy. And yeah, in this movie, he's perfect as Gil, and of course you are wanting Anne and Gilbert to get together because he's just so likable, and so is Anne. Richard Farnsworth plays Matthew, and he is wonderful as this man who is very shy and a hard worker, and he also cares about Anne very deeply as well. And I've talked about Richard Farnsworth before, and I actually gave a brief biography of him when I talked about Misery, because he is in the movie Misery. Anne of Green Gables and Misery could not be more different, but I absolutely love both. And I think my episode for Misery was really good too. So you should definitely check that out if you're a fan of Stephen King, or even if you're not, maybe you'll still enjoy the podcast because I think that's one of the better episodes I have done. Anyway, Richard Farnsworth, he's great. He's very likable and very wholesome and very, he just feels like a regular guy. And he just seems very likable. He has a very likable vibe about him. So honestly, there aren't that many changes from book to movie. So there's a couple to talk about, but it feels silly to nitpick this because the movie just includes everything. They add scenes, which they have so much time that they're able to include everything from the book almost. And then they even add some stuff. So the biggest changes are the scenes that they added. Even though there's not many changes to talk about, there are a couple, and I'm going to start with Gilbert. So in the movie, they definitely focus on Gilbert and Anne even more because in the book, they don't meet until they're at school and he calls her carrots. And this is in the movie, but they had met prior to that at the church picnic where Anne and Diane beat him in a 3-legged race. And so that's his first interaction with her. And he's instantly taken with her, you can tell. And she is too, kind of. But then he calls her carrots the next day at school. And as in the book, she's of course very upset about this, and she breaks the slate over his head, and she refuses to talk to him from there on out. And he tries multiple times to apologize, yet for years, she just will not talk to him. However, in the movie, she isn't quite so stubborn about it, and there are a few times where she tries to reach out to him. For example, at the Christmas ball, she walks up to him and he ignores her. That was not in the book. And in the book, he saves her from in the river where she's in the boat pretending to be the woman from Camelot, and then the boat leaks and she has to hold on to the bridge thing. And Gilbert saves her in both book and movie. And in both, he apologizes again, and he's like, please, this was years ago. Can we put this behind us? And in the book, she says, no, I still don't forgive you. However, she instantly regrets it. And as time goes on, she's like, man, I do forgive him, but now I've missed my chance because now he's ignoring me because he's like, this is the last time I'll ever try to make amends. And so she feels like she's missed her chance. And in the movie, this happens too, but also in this scene is when he tells her that they tied for the Queen's test. Whereas in the book, Diana is the one who tells her, then he's like, hey, you tied with Gilbert. Whereas in the movie, he tells her then in that moment. And so that kind of overshadows any conversation they had about their friendship, because then she's just excited about being number one with this test. And speaking of queens, while they're there, she wants to give him a note, like proclaiming her love, apparently. However, she sees him with another girl, and so she runs away and loses her courage and doesn't want to tell him that. And so just different things like that, like her walking up to him at the dance, her wanting to give him this note. And then when she walks on top of the rooftop, in the book, that was just girls around, whereas in the movie, boys were there too. And so Gilbert sees her doing this. And so they just have a lot more interaction in the movie. And the movie is just really trying to get you to be excited about their potential relationship, which, by the way, I know academic rivals and enemies to lovers are popular tropes in romances. Anne of Green Gables, that's what it is. They're academic rivals because both of them are at the top of their class and want to beat each other. And then obviously enemies to lovers in there too. So if you're into that type of thing, you will love this book. But yeah, in the book, they don't become friendly and start talking until the very end. Like, he gives her a carriage ride home, and then they stop and talk at the gate for like over a half hour, and they finally are like, you know what, let's be friends. This is silly. Let's put all this behind us. And so it's literally not until the very end that they start talking and that you really get a feel for like, ooh, like what could happen between them. So yeah, it's not until the very end. So if you want more Gil-Anne relationship stuff, you have to read the next two books. Whereas the movie, yeah, the movie builds it up a bit more. And the movie has the ending, like in the book, it's not romantic when they're talking. You were just seeing that they're finally becoming friends. Whereas in the movie, they have a romantic interaction and he like caresses her and he calls her carrots in a tender way, which I thought that was kind of silly. But yeah, so the movie builds up their romance is what I'm saying. Also, in the end of the movie, Diana tells Anne that Diana had a crush on Gilbert, which that was not in the book at all. And I'm not a fan of, like, it just seemed unnecessary in the movie. Like, why do we have to toss this in? Like, why does Diana have to have an unrequited romance with Gil or whatever? It just seemed unnecessary. And also with Marilla, in the movie, she did not want Gilbert, like, interested in Anne. And she even threatens him, being like, you know, Anne is too young to be dating right now. And in both, we hear that she had once dated Gilbert's dad. However, in the book, she was kind of like, oh, that's all in the past. It's all ancient history. And in the end, when she sees her talking to Gilbert, she's excited for Anne. Whereas in the movie, yeah, like she made a point to not want Anne to be dating people in general, but she was tried to deter Gilbert. Maybe part of that is from her history with his dad, but also I think she was just very protective of Anne and didn't want her growing up either. And if you start dating someone, it's a sign that someone is growing up. And she's like, no, I want Anne to stay young and innocent and never leave, in a way. And it was fine in the movie, but I didn't find it totally necessary. One thing the movie did leave out is a number of scenes with church where Anne goes to church. At first she goes by herself because Marilla is sick, and then she goes again, and it's just a bigger part of the book. And she becomes very good friends. So they have a new minister come to town because the old minister retires, and this new minister has a wife, and Anne just instantly, you know, has that bosom friend, kindred spirit connection with this woman. And so she's in the movie, but she was a much bigger part in the book, and just the connection Anne has with her, and also how the woman is a positive influence on Anne, because Anne is at some party or something and she's like, oh, I thought of gambling, but then I didn't want to have to tell, I forget the minister's wife's name, but she's like, but I didn't want to disappoint her and tell her I gambled, and so I decided not to, and I'm so glad I didn't. And so just one of those relationships that helps Anne be a better person. And so yeah, like I said, this book and movie, like the book is such a comfort read and the movie is such a comfort watch. I grew up watching this adaptation and I love it. As I said, Green Gables, Avonlea, it just seems so idyllic, and I love reading about it and I love watching it. And the characters, even the ones you don't love, or maybe you don't love to start, like Mrs. Lind. Still, I enjoyed reading about all of them and the relationships they have with each other and their conversations. But yeah, I wanted to share a section of the book that just shows how beautifully it's written and just how idyllic Avonlea is based on this section. I mean, throughout the whole book, it just sounds like a wonderful place. But anyway, I wanted to share a section from the book, which reads, Anne and Diana found the drive home as pleasant as the drive in. Pleasanter indeed, since there was the delightful consciousness of home waiting at the end of it. It was sunset when they passed through White Sands and turned into the shore road. Beyond, the Avonlea hills came out darkly against the saffron sky. Behind them, the moon was rising out of the sea that grew all radiant and transfigured in her light. Every little cove along the curving road was a marvel of dancing ripples. The waves broke with the soft swish of the rocks below them, and the tang of the sea was strong in the fresh air. So beautiful. So Ella Montgomery is an amazing writer. So eloquent. And then I wanted to talk about the different aspects of this book, like I said, where It's like lessons that are learned, but it's not like in this cheesy way, like, and that's why you shouldn't be greedy or something. Like, Little Woman has different lessons that are learned. And especially in the first half of Little Woman, when they're younger, I just wasn't feeling it as much. And it did seem a bit too cheesy at times. Whereas Anne of Green Gables, I just enjoyed it more. And it was things that I felt like I could apply to my life as well, even as an adult, like I said. And so I just wanted to share some of those things from that. For example, when Anne is picked up, she has a dress that was made from fabric that was donated to the orphanage. And she talks about how she heard different people say how like, oh, the guy donated this fabric because it was so ugly and no one would buy it. But Anne is like, but I like to imagine that he was so kind and generous and he wanted to help these poor orphan girls. And so he donated all this fabric out of the goodness of his heart. And I love that because especially in situations where we don't know the person's intentions, we may as well assume the best, right? It helps us live better, happier lives when we assume the best of others. Even when we have reason to not assume the best, you can still assume the best though. And ultimately, it's not for their sake, it's for your sake. Because I know in my own life, I'm a happier person when I assume the best of others and when I try to see things from their perspective. Even like, for example, an example I use when I'm talking about this is someone who is being aggressive, driving aggressively. Instead of being like, why are they doing that? Who do they think they are? They're a jerk, blah, blah, blah. Instead, I try to be curious about it and be like, wow, I wonder what's going on in their life. Like maybe their kid is in the hospital, maybe their wife is sick, maybe, their dog, something is going on in their life that's causing them to have to speed and drive crazy. And I'm just gonna assume that they have good intentions and that there's just something going on in their life that is causing them to act this way. And I'm going to assume that it is not them as a person. They're not a bad person. Their intentions are good and whatever is causing them to act out in this way. So I try to apply that to life and it helps me just have a better perspective on life and people. And then there is another part where she is very excited about an upcoming picnic and it reads, "You set your heart too much on things, Anne," said Marilla with a sigh. "I'm afraid there'll be a great many disappointments in store for you through life." "Oh, Marilla, looking forward to things is half the pleasure of them," explained Anne. "You mayn't get the things themselves, but nothing can prevent you from having the fun of looking forward to them. Mrs. Lynde says, 'Blessed are they who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed.' But I think it would be worse to expect nothing than to be disappointed." And this makes me think of, there's this self-help podcast I listen to called Better Than Happy. She has this phrase she said in an episode where it's like, the better I am at dealing with disappointment, the more amazing my life will become. And so that's kind of reflected there where it's like, we always feel like being disappointed is like the worst thing that could possibly happen. But is it really? Like, even if you're disappointed about not getting something, at least you had the anticipation and the thoughts about it that helped bring that excitement and joy to your life. Even if you didn't end up getting it, at least you got to experience the anticipation for it. And yeah, we make such a big deal out of disappointment when really disappointment happens all the time. And so is it really worth ruining your life by being so upset over disappointment? No, it's not. So the better we are at dealing with disappointment, being like, hey, it happens, whatever, move on. I like that too, about just having a better perspective on disappointment. And I read this book first, 3 or 4 years ago. And that passage in particular is one that really stuck with me at the time. And I've thought about that line so much through the years about not being so upset over disappointment and enjoying looking forward to things. Even if there's a chance it might not happen, at least you get to enjoy the looking forward to it. And as Anne grows older, she does start to mature and she talks to Matthew about how she's not going to be as silly and romantic as she was when she was young. And by romantic, I don't mean like love. I mean romantic as in seeing the magic of things and being very imaginative. And so she's getting older and she's like, oh, I'm not going to be so silly about things anymore. And Matthew says to her, "Don't give up all your romance, Anne," he whispered shyly. "A little of it is a good thing. Not too much, of course, but keep a little of it, Anne. Keep a little of it." And I like that too, because sometimes we feel like it's time to grow up and mature and, see the reality of life. When there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of that romance, a little bit of that imagination, that positivity, which it annoys me when people are like, "I'm just being realistic." No, you're just being negative. You can be realistic and still be positive and see the good things. And keeping a little bit of that romance, even in your adulthood, and not getting rid of all of the silliness and the imagination and everything, And then another section I wanted to read is Anne talking about all the lessons she's learned through the mistakes she's made. And it reads, "I've learned a new and valuable lesson today. Ever since I came to Green Gables, I've been making mistakes, and each mistake has helped to cure me of some great shortcoming. The affair with the amethyst brooch cured me of meddling with things that didn't belong to me. The haunted wood mistake cured me of letting my imagination run away with me. The liniment cake mistake cured me of carelessness in cooking. Dyeing my hair cured me of vanity. And today's mistake is going to cure me of being too romantic. I have come to the conclusion that there is no use trying to be romantic in Avonlea. I feel quite sure that you will see a great improvement in me in this respect, Marilla. And on to book versus movie, which I know this ended up being a short episode, but like I said, the movie follows the book so closely. So anyway, whether a book or a movie, you can't go wrong with either one. Both of them are wonderful and delightful. I will say I think I like the book more because it just includes more of those sections that just really stuck with me and really made me reflect and try to improve myself as well. But the movie is amazing. This is a fantastic adaptation. It's just beautiful throughout. The acting is incredible, and it just totally captures the idyllic world of Avonlea and these amazing people that live in it. And as I said, I've read the first 3 Anne books, and I would highly recommend all 3 of them. Reading this one makes me want to read the next 2 as well, and maybe I'll watch the adaptation and do a follow-up video for the next 2 books, which the next 2 books are kind of combined with the made-for-TV movie. They kind of combine those 2 books together, if I recall. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but that's what I seem to recall them doing. Anyway, so maybe I'll do that. Anyway, love these. Can't recommend it enough. This is a 5-star read for me, and it's just wonderful. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, this YouTube video, and join me next week for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is the book and movie that won the poll I posted on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to my channel, subscribe. That way you can take part in future book first movie polls, and you can choose what I am covering here. So anyway, I guess that wraps it up. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.